Well, we are so delighted today to have here on the Palmetto Family Matters podcast, Dr. Corey DeAngelis. And Corey is the executive director of the Educational Freedom Institute. He is a senior fellow of the American Culture Project. He has a PhD in education from the University of Arkansas. Go Pigs!
That's right.
And so we're so glad to have you. Corey, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Listen, we want to just kind of jump right into this. So give us a little bit of your background and then really what your passion, your mission, vision, passion are all about.
Yeah, so I started all this as a researcher at the University of Arkansas. I did my PhD in education policy, and I got really interested in the concept of school choice. My first study looked at the Milwaukee private school choice program that's been around for decades. It started in 1990. We followed students over time and found that by the time they were about 30 years of age, there was about a 50% reduction in certain types of crime associated with getting a better education, getting a better opportunity through a school choice program. And so I started to do a lot of studies looking at non-test score outcomes. Obviously, we want schools to improve math and reading and writing, but schools can also improve longer-term outcomes that are far more important to children, such as whether they're going to get involved with the criminal justice system, if they're going to get a job, are they going to graduate from high school. And that was, one of my studies also looked at school choice improving mental health among students in the long run as well. I thought I was going to go into academia. I saw that was going to be an uphill battle. A lot of the peers in that peer review process were more like enemies than anything else. And so instead of going against the grain there, I figured I'd go into the think tank world, where I became affiliated with a bunch of different think tanks along the way, where I'm more rewarded for my ideas instead of being penalized. But I fight to fund students, not systems, what most people would call school choice. And in the past few years, we've had more momentum on the issue of school choice in the past 4 years than we've had in the preceding 4 decades. And that's because the teachers' unions really stepped on a rake. They fought to keep the schools closed. They overplayed their hand and showed families what was happening in the classroom. A lot of parents who thought their kids were okay before, who thought the schools were focused on education, started to see that they were focused more on left-wing indoctrination. And those parents who had their kids in so-called good public schools based on their ratings from the state started to say, hold up, I want another option. I want another opportunity, especially because when I go to the school board meeting, I'm getting silenced. They're cutting off my mic. They're calling us domestic terrorists for wanting more of a say in our children's education. And so the next step was obviously, well, let me take my money for my kids somewhere else. It's my taxpayer dollars. It should follow the child, just like we do with basically every other industry. We have competition. We have the money following the person. We have competition. We have a free market. And so we applied that logic to K-12 as well. And now we've had 16 states pass universal school choice in the past 4 years. My home state of Texas being the latest, New Hampshire being the next one, and South Carolina is also on deck. A bill in the lap of the governor right now, I believe.
In the lap of the governor, yes.
To expand school choice. And Henry McMaster, as we all know, is a big proponent of school choice. So I have no doubt that he will sign that bill that will pass, that will allow about 85% of school-age kids to be eligible for school choice. That's a big win in South Carolina. That's going from 0 to 85 very quickly.
Well, we feel like we've been playing a little bit of catch-up to get there, but we're very delighted about that. Let me just kind of maybe share with the audience where Palmetto Family stands, because we're the voice for biblical values in South Carolina. We're part of the Family Policy Alliance in 44 states, including Texas, has a Family Policy Alliance. And one of our 7 core values, which are based on all biblical values, is educational freedom. And that's really based on the beginning of time when the first parents, Adam and Eve, had two boys. And when they came on the scene, Cain and Abel, what we notice is that they were adults, they had jobs, they were working, and they were flourishing. So human flourishing is a part of that. And so we believe that educational responsibility lies in the hands of the parents first and foremost before there was ever human government. So whatever happens in South Carolina with educational choice, educational freedom, putting the responsibility back on the parents, we're right there on the front lines standing for that because we believe that's a biblical value. And of course, in obedience to God, we also see that that's where human flourishing. And I think what's so cool is you said you saw a 50% change, especially after 30 years old. So actually, educational choice is cultural transformative. Can you add a little bit on that? Yeah.
Exactly. That's where my studies began with. And who would have known this was going to be front and center after COVID, when the fight for school choice changed from only being about test scores. I mean, we always had good arguments for school choice for low-income families stuck in objectively failing government-run schools, but parents started to see that schools also shape people's values, especially after the Zoom school where they saw the gender ideology in the classroom. They were hearing about divisive concepts like critical race theory and DEI, and families didn't want that. They wanted no more politicization. They wanted education. And, the public school system also discriminates against religious families overall. There was actually a case in the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago out of Maryland where families weren't even able to opt out of gender ideology instruction in their school when they were able to do so before, but now in Maryland they stopped allowing families to do that. This is a horrible precedent, but I think we're going to win the case at the Supreme Court. Thankfully, families will be able to opt out of that type of instruction if it conflicts with their sincerely held religious beliefs. But we should take it a step further, because families, especially religious families, if you want your kid to have a religious education growing up, you have no choice. You can't send them to the public school system. You basically have to pay twice. Once out of taxes for the school you can't use for your kid because it conflicts with their values, and then again out of pocket. Why should anybody have to pay twice? It is discriminatory against religious families, and we already have a provision and a precedent for students with disabilities. In the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, under the federal education law, we require public school districts to pay for a private school education for kids with disabilities if that public school can't meet their needs. Mm-hmm. And so we should apply that logic to religious families as well, because they're getting the short end of the stick. And I wrote about this in an article for American Institute for Economic Research at their blog called The Daily Economy the other day, pointing out that the public school system is discriminatory in a lot of ways and failing in a lot of ways, especially for religious families. And thankfully, as Vodi Bakum said best, we cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education, right, and be surprised when they come home as Romans. The parents aren't surprised anymore. They've woken up. They're never going back to sleep. And as we know from Proverbs, we need to train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he becomes old, he will not depart from it. This is long-lasting effects on kids, goes far beyond test scores, and I'm thankful that families are reclaiming education all across the country, and South Carolina's taken a big step forward this year to restore parental rights in education.
Well, thank you, and we're thrilled about that. So let's segue into that. What do you see in our educational freedom bill here in South Carolina that gives choice to nearly 85% of South Carolina's children? Explain that to a person who's here. For example, my children are all adults, grown. I have two boys, 2 girls. They were all homeschooled because of the nature of my religious work that I was involved in. And 3 of them have master's degrees. One's working on a doctorate. very, very smart, very well educated. And a lot of families, so like my family would have never been able to, we paid twice all of their growing up years. How helping a South Carolina family understand this?
Yeah, so the money is meant for educating the child, not for protecting a particular institution, whether it's public or private, religious or non-religious. So what the bill does is allows you to take a portion of the money we're already spending on education. And I think in South Carolina, the bill's about $7,000. I think it's about half of what you spend in the government-run schools each year.
Right.
You get to take a portion of your tax dollars. And if you want to take it to the public school and it's doing a good job already and it's aligned with your values already, you can still do that. But if not, you can opt out of that system, take that half of the funding for your child, about $7,000, to a private school to pay for tuition and fees. You could also use it for other education expenses like tutoring, textbooks, even homeschooling expenses if you'd like as well. So it's the concept of the money following the child. And a lot of other states are doing this. As I said, 16 already have universal school choice, which means no income restrictions at all. I will say the South Carolina bill falls a little bit short of universal because it is limited to families who earn below 500% of the poverty level, which does include about 85% of school-age children in South Carolina. So it's a big win. It's not, we're not done yet, but it is a huge step in the right direction. And once you pass that initial program, it becomes easier to eliminate that cap on the eligibility in the future. And so that's the nuts and bolts. And just as an analogy, we do this with higher education. South Carolina has a scholarship program for kids going to college. And you can use those scholarships for public universities. You can use them for private universities, even religious. South Carolina also has pre-K programs at the state level and at the federal level, Head Start, if you want to mention that as well. But where the money follows the student and the parent can direct where that money goes, and it can even go to religious pre-K providers. So all we're arguing with school choice with this bill that's going to be signed by the governor, I expect very soon, is we apply that same logic of the money following the person's choice that we already use in higher education and pre-K, just to do it for those in-between years of K through 12 education as well.
So it's really not being inconsistent at all. I was the president of Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina for 9 years. And of course, we had 40+% of our student body were from the state of South Carolina. And we were a part of the South Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities. And we had scores and scores of students who got what they called life scholarships and so forth to be able to come. So it's really consistently the same thing.
Exactly. It's the money following, and it's even a more of a no-brainer policy when it comes to K through 12 because we're already spending the money. So it's a benefit for the taxpayers too, because now it's half of what you would have spent otherwise. And then for higher education, it's a little different because you're spending additional taxpayer dollars. So it has more of a fiscal impact for higher ed and pre-K relative to the status quo. But that's, the logic is the same of scholarships for K through 12, like high school, like post-secondary and pre-K.
It sounds like it would be even cheaper for the state in the long run when you consider you're only putting half the money into the education of the child, and yet the returns back is huge.
Yeah, we've seen this across the country, even for charter schools. So I've done a lot of studies on this. When I started at the University of Arkansas, I've done at least 3 or 4 of them on the return of investment on school choice, finding that charter schools consistently get a fraction of what they spend in the public schools each year. And they consistently get about the same or better outcomes. And so that implies a positive return on investment. And, parents choosing a fraction of the funding when they could get the full amount in the public school system also tells you that something more efficient is going on in the private sector. I mean, the government's notorious for spending taxpayer money willy-nilly and just not being accountable to those spending decisions. I mean, the trends over time in the U.S. in our education system has shown that the spending often goes towards administrative bloat. It doesn't even go to teacher salaries. So the teachers get the short end of the stick. The money doesn't go in the classroom. The parents and the kids are shortchanged too. And so it only really benefits the people at the top, the superintendents and the administrators in the system, but it's not really good for kids or teachers. But when you have school choice and you have competition, that means more money going in the classroom towards the teachers. Parents have more choice at the same time. And so it's really a win-win solution for most of the players. And so that's why we've also seen that the public schools consistently have gotten better in response to this in other states. In Florida, for example, just to your south, they used to be at the bottom of the pack on the nation's report card on math and reading. They were horrible a couple decades ago. They've expanded school choice to all families incrementally. And now U.S. News and World Report shows Florida at number 1 on education.
Wow.
And that's despite spending 27% less than the national average. It's not a money issue. It's an incentive issue. Florida's got it right. And they've also had 11 rigorous studies out of Florida, 10 of them positive, showing school choice is a rising tide that lifts all boats. And a new study just came out of Ohio. They have universal school choice. The Wall Street Journal just reported on this report from the Urban Institute showing that getting a scholarship increased the chances of graduating from college by 50%, but also there were positive spillover effects. The public school students improved as well. So it's a win-win solution for it's not public versus private. It's not parent versus teacher. It's choice versus coercion, and it's parents and teachers versus the system.
Let me ask you this. This is going to be a question that will come. So in South Carolina, so we understand public schools, charter schools, Christian schools, private schools, so forth. Will this include homeschools as well?
I believe so. The bill that just passed here in Texas also does include homeschooling. I believe it's an education savings account, which also includes funding for homeschool families as well. That means that doesn't mean you can just pocket the funding and say, I'm a homeschooler. You can use the funding as a homeschooler for homeschool expenses, including curriculum, tutoring, textbooks. So it can help you homeschool, but it wouldn't allow you to say, I'm a homeschool teacher and I'm going to pay myself a salary for doing so.
Correct.
You could pay a micro school teacher to do so.
Right.
But you can't pocket the money yourself for your own child.
So with the homeschoolers, I know that there are quite a few of them that are concerned about the state's overreach of control of their education. Yeah. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, the argument is that with government shekels comes government shackles. But the reality is you can get the shackles without the shekels. And we do. We've seen it historically. We see it now. Guess what just happened in Illinois? They got rid of their school choice program in 2023. And then this year, they're gunning for the homeschoolers, too. They're calling to regulate home education. And that's not a school choice issue. It's because they have authoritarians in office who fight against both school choice and homeschool freedom at the same time. And so the legislators can walk and chew gum at the same time. The Democrats can do it, but the Republicans can, too. And they are in states like Ohio and Wyoming. In 2023, for example, Ohio Republicans passed universal school choice. And in the same session, they deregulated homeschooling. They added more homeschool freedom and protections. Wyoming this year, right before they went universal on school choice, they passed a bill to expand homeschool freedom and to deregulate homeschooling. And so, I see this as a separate issue. We shouldn't make perfect the enemy of the good, especially when all these programs are voluntary. Families can make that decision for themselves and weigh the costs and benefits. But the side benefit of having school choice is that since you can get regulated out of existence anyway by authoritarian regimes, you're more likely to win against that overreach in the future if that ever comes to South Carolina. If you have people on your side. Politics is all about organized interest pushing for what you want. And so if you have school choice families on your side fighting at the legislature to say, no way, you're not taking our freedom away, you build a broader coalition to fight back. And so if Illinois had a bigger program, if Illinois had more people to band together and say, you're not taking my freedom away, they'd probably be more likely to fight back against overreach on the homeschool side too. And if you just look at states like New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, according to HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they are the worst for homeschool freedom. And guess what? They also are the worst for school choice.
Right.
So you look on the flip side. Yeah. So homeschool freedom tends to correlate with school choice freedom, and is probably because you build these coalitions to fight back. And we saw this play out in Arizona too, as a side note.
Let me ask you this question, a little change here. Where do you see education changing right now across the United States, and especially tamping down the Department of Ed by the president and returning power to the states?
Yeah, it's amazing that Trump has so many promises made, promises kept. My book was actually endorsed by President Trump. It also became a USA Today bestseller right after that. Coincidence? I think not, but thank you. I went to the signing of the executive order at the White House, I believe it was last month, on abolishing the Department of Education. And he's taking the first step at dismantling that unconstitutional department. Just a reminder for listeners, the word education is not in the U.S. Constitution. That department is a violation of the 10th Amendment. It's unconstitutional. It should have never existed. It was created in 1979 as a political payoff by Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, to the teachers union, the NEA, the largest labor union in the country. And it was created with this express purpose of closing achievement gaps, improving student outcomes. It hasn't done either of those things. The only thing it has done is throw more money at the problem. It has spent nearly $3 trillion since its inception, and the outcomes have not gotten any better. And so the proof is in the pudding. We have 45 years of data showing that the Department of Education has been a total failure, and all the fear mongering by the left on this issue, saying that it's going to defund education, is just, they're not dealing with reality and what the proposals actually are. In fact, Trump, Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, and the Republicans in Congress have been calling to return education to the states by block granting that funding we're already spending at the federal level. Give it back to the states. Let them figure it out. You'll have more money in the classroom than before because you won't be wasting it on these paper pushers in D.C., these bureaucrats, thousands of miles away who aren't doing anything. They don't educate a single child. They don't employ a single teacher in D.C. at the department. And so we're just getting rid of the bureaucracy. The funding is going into the classroom. And any useful programs like the special needs programs, those everybody has consistently said, and it's included in the bill in Congress, would move under different departments like the Department of Health and Human Services. So the teachers unions are just fear mongering at this point. They feel like they're going to lose power, but they're arguing with a straw man. They're not arguing with the actual proposal in Congress. You can look it up. It's a bill by Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican out of South Dakota, called the Returning Education to Our States Act. So I'm very optimistic. They've already laid off about half of the staff at the department. Things haven't really changed, if you haven't noticed, probably because those people weren't doing anything to begin with. I've heard stories of people at the department earning six figures, making one PowerPoint the entire year, and that's all they did. Otherwise, didn't really do anything on the job. It is a jobs program for administrators, not an education initiative for kids. And so Trump is on the right side of history with this. He won the parent vote in November by 9 points after campaigning on abolishing the department and consistently campaigning for nationwide school choice. There's also a bill in Congress right now, the Educational Choice for Children Act, which would be a federal tax credit. It would be a federal school choice program, but it wouldn't be federal government strings and funding. You'd get to keep more of your own funding and not give it to the government in the form of a tax credit. And so you could use that for educational expenses too. And then on the school choice front, we've just had so much momentum at the state level. Hopefully the Democrat states will come along at some point, but it's mostly Republican states behaving as the laboratories of democracy that the founders intended.
Well, to me, that's super exciting. I've got 5 grandchildren, and some of them go to different schools, but I have a couple that are homeschooled, and the state that they're in, Utah, is providing and has made a major difference for them as a family to give them the right kind of education.
I will say Utah, an activist judge out of Salt Lake City, they just put an injunction on their school choice program. That injunction got lifted, thankfully, and I think the state Supreme Court is going to rule our way, which brings up something that's the elephant in the room in South Carolina. Last time South Carolina passed a program like this, it got blocked in the courts 3-2. But the good news is the new Chief Justice in South Carolina is actually the guy who wrote the main dissent in the last opinion. So he's firmly in favor of school choice. And I think it'll flip our way either 3-2 or even 4-1, or maybe it'll even be unanimous with the writing on the wall.
I hope so. I heard Chief Justice Kittredge speak last week, and he's a tremendous man, and we're delighted to have him here in South Carolina in his leadership role. And I'm hoping that it gets to the governor's desk, and then we'll see where it goes from there. One last question. Tell us about your work and your latest book.
Yeah, it's called The Parent Revolution. It's endorsed by Trump. It's a national bestseller, and it's currently on Amazon for 50% off. So get it while it's hot. I don't know how long the limited time deal is going to last, but it was also endorsed by Ted Cruz, the senator from my home state of Texas. He says on the back, quote, "You can ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book." She is the head of the teachers union at the national level. She lobbied the CDC to close the schools as long as possible. But I actually dedicated the book to her. You can see it in the front, a dedication to Randy Weingarten for her inadvertently doing more to advance school choice and homeschooling than anyone could have ever imagined by overplaying her hand and awakening a sleeping giant, which happens to be parents who want more of a say in their kids' education.
Well, and it should be that way, to the equal and opposite reaction to a bad action. So, Corey, we hope the listeners will buy that online. I buy everything by Kindle, so I'm sure I can get it by Kindle and download it. So thank you. We are honored to have you. Thank you for your influence in the country and especially in the state of South Carolina. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
God bless you, Corey.